Welcome to The Word Revealed with David Palmer and Scott Burns, where we talk about everything Bible from Genesis to Revelation. Let's join the conversation.
Welcome back to The Word Revealed. I'm David Palmer with my good friend, fellow lover of Christ and His Word, Scott Burns. How are you doing, Scott?
I'm blessed, David, and I'm trying to be a blessing to others.
I like it. How are you trying to be a blessing these days?
Trying to serve in practical ways and listen to people when they need an ear and encourage people when they need a word.
That's like the perfect introduction to our passage today.
It is, yeah. That was unintentional, but...
All right. So how do you see it as the perfect intro?
Well, we've got Acts 22 today. We left off last time. Paul was about to address an angry mob, and now he addresses this mob with his testimony. He's giving them a word of how he came to know the Lord and why they need to know the Lord as well.
It's a really important passage in Acts 22. You know, the crowd that's assembled there is this massive pilgrimage crowd. So it's like it's not a perfect parallel, but when you think of a huge crowd like making pilgrimage to Mecca, the numbers swell, and everyone's in their particularly highest religious state of mind.
Yeah.
And that brings like a devotional mindset. It also brings a extra sensitivity to anything that seems to you in your religious mindset that's out of tune with that. You're going to overreact to that for sure. You call it an angry mob, and it certainly is an angry mob, but it's also a group of people that Paul loves. And right? And he addresses them as...
But they want to kill him.
Some of them do, at least, yeah. Enough of them in the crowd.
Yeah.
But they want to kill him for religious reasons.
Right.
Why? Because they think he has desecrated the sanctuary. Just to be really precise about it, they think he has violated sacred space, and that act in and of itself places their lives in danger from their theological point of view. So it's a large public moment, and he addresses them with the language of kinship and family. You know, calls them brothers, fathers, and then asks them, hear the defense. In Greek, this word is word apology, apologia. Hear my apology. So when you hear that word in English, I'm gonna make an apology. What do you think comes next?
I usually think it's going to be, I'm sorry.
Right.
I made a mistake.
Yeah, that's what we tend to think. But in Greek, apologia, apology doesn't mean I'm sorry. It's the word that's used in the courtroom for giving it's a legal term, really, to make a defense. So the court here it's a religious court. It's not just the court of public opinion, but his life's on the line, actually.
Yeah.
So he wants to explain why they shouldn't kill him.
And since you're saying that's what the word means, I guess that explains apologetics as a defense of the faith.
Right. And that the apologetics as a reasoned explanation for this.
Yeah.
And the trajectory of early Christian apologetic writings as explaining the faith, there are apologetic works in Judaism in the intertestamental period or contemporary with the New Testament. Josephus has a book called Against Appian, which is a 2-volume apologetic work of biblical faith toward the pagan world. And actually that work is transmitted by Christians because it's so good. I love it. And a lot of early Christian writers were like, how do you explain the Bible to the pagan world? This is a pretty good attempt. But here, it's apologetics of a devout Jew who's a Christian, Paul, to other devout Jews who not only are not yet Christians, but think, like he used to think, Christianity is bad and dangerous.
Yeah, that's actually where he starts. He identifies with them as one who was opposed to the way and a persecutor of those who followed Christ. Yeah,
he builds a lot of sympathy. That's a great observation, Scott. I think that he not only builds sympathy with his story, he builds sympathy and empathy, understanding by addressing them in Hebrew. So we have a language shift. And Hebrew was still spoken in Jerusalem and Judea. We have letters written in Hebrew from the 1st and 2nd century still. Rabbinic literature continues in Hebrew. Aramaic is spoken in the north. We have some sayings of Jesus that are preserved in Aramaic. Greek is the lingua franca. But the fact that he is addressing like devout religious Jews in Hebrew is speaking right to the heart. And he tells them, he says, I'm a Jew from Tarsus in Cilicia, but brought up here in Jerusalem. And he says, I was trained, educated at the feet. That's a rabbinic idiom. A student of a rabbi learns at their feet. It's a famous line in Mishnah Avot that says, make room in your house for sages and sit at their feet and drink in their words with great thirst. So that's an idiom for being a student of Gamliel.
And who's Gamliel?
Gamliel is the leading rabbinic teacher of his generation, actually. So this is
no small connection.
No, this is I've been taught by the best in the generation. And many people may have heard of the name Hillel. So if you go to a Jewish study center on a university campus, it's often called the Hillel Center. Hillel and Shammai were the leading. There's always a pair, so a pair of scholars that go for each generation. And Hillel and Shammai are the pair at the time of Jesus, but Gamliel is one of the famous pairs of Paul's generation. So he studies with the most well-known guy. And Gamliel, in the opinions that are preserved of his in the rabbinic corpus, there are many, and he tends to have like a moderating position. He was known for his wisdom, and there are some great stories about him, but he's invoking that and reminding people. So he's trained with Gamliel, and he's trained according, he calls it the strict manner. Translation is just such an impossible thing. When you hear strict, if you said, David, you're a strict parent, or I said, Scott, you're a strict dad, what would that mean?
It would mean that I'm high expectation, limiting, hard line, my way only.
Oh, that's what I hear too. What if I said about you to someone else, Scott is very precise and accurate when he is interpreting the Bible?
That would be a compliment. At least I would take it that way.
Yeah, I think that'd be a compliment.
Yeah.
If you said that about me, I'd feel like, hey.
Yeah.
That's what's actually being said here. The word that's used here, akrivia, means like exact, accurate. So he's just saying, I grew up in Jerusalem, I learned from the best, I learned from the most precise way of interpreting the Torah of our fathers. So he's building a lot of solidarity with his audience.
Yeah, and then he says he's zealous for God as all of you are this day.
Yeah, so he's just like, I am like you in all of these ways. And zeal for God, again, that's a positive thing in Judaism. God is said to be a zealous God. Zeal for God means Jesus, when he overturns the temple, he quotes from the prophets and says, zeal for your house has consumed me. So we would say things like, this guy really takes his walk with Christ seriously. So he builds all this solidarity, and then he keeps going. He says, I persecuted this way, referring to the early name for the church. Mm-hmm. I persecuted him to the death, binding people, delivering to prison, had the high priest, elders, they can testify. They gave me letters, and I was on my way to Damascus. So everything he's just said is connecting. And then he tells the next part of his story.
Yeah, the next part of his story is the the conversion part of his story, the Damascus Road, where he encounters Jesus Christ.
Doesn't everything change for people when they are encountered by Jesus Christ?
Yeah.
Didn't your life change?
Yes. Yes. So he encounters him. It says, at noon, a great light from heaven suddenly shone around me. He falls to the ground, hears a voice saying, Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me?
So powerful. What strikes me right now, just talking about this together, sharing our testimonies is really important. And I think sometimes when we share our testimonies today, we tend to think that movement one of the testimony is just an account of like my sinfulness. And then I meet Jesus. And it just strikes me here in this setting that the testimony is first communicating to your audience, I'm like you in every way. And then there was a piece missing in my life that I didn't even know was missing, but that missing piece changed everything.
Yeah.
And it just strikes me like, wouldn't that be a little bit sometimes more powerful a way to tell your testimony when you're sharing it with a group of people, to start by seeking to establish, I am just like you?
Yeah, and I've heard some testimonies where they seem to spend way too much time talking about who they used to be and too little time talking about who they became. Or they, instead of saying, I used to be like you, they try and kind of posture themselves as the worst of the worst. Like, let me tell you how bad I was. But they spend too much time on the wrong part of the story. Paul is making a beeline as quickly as he can to meeting Jesus.
I agree. I think sometimes, you don't want to tell your testimony, especially if you think that a testimony is an apology. It's an apologetic moment. It's a moment that you're trying to establish the public truth of who Jesus is. So I've heard versions like that too, where you feel like I'm just left with the impression like what a terrible guy this guy was, and I guess Jesus is great because he can save people as terrible as that.
Yeah.
And instead, it's what Paul's doing here is something a little different. He's connecting with his audience in a very profound way. And then says, Jesus met me, and, I said, what should I do, Lord? And he said, go into Damascus, you'll be told. He was blinded. We've read this before in chapter 9. And he says, I was led into the hand, and a devout man came up to me and said, Brother Saul, receive your sight. So he really highlights the role that Ananias plays. We get some extra information here in these verses.
Yeah, verses 17 through 21 is a portion of Paul's story that we don't get anywhere else. So sometimes when we tell our testimony, there's parts we should add before certain audiences, and maybe there's parts that we don't add in front of other audiences. There's the true facts of your story, and then there's parts of your story that are more appropriate to share in one context or another. And so verses 17 to 21 are a portion of Paul's testimony that we don't see anywhere else in Scripture.
I love the God-centric nature of what he says just one breath before that, when he says, Ananias says, the God of our fathers appointed you to know his will and see the righteous one. So God acts. He's baptized, and then these verses that you just mentioned give us a return trip to Jerusalem, and Paul praying, and we, like you said, we don't know about this in any other passage. And there he's praying, and the ESV says he fell into a trance, which is I think of a trance.
Yeah, I was hoping you'd explain this word a little, because it is a troubling word from the English perspective.
Okay, so why don't you unpack Just take us on the inside, Reverend Scott Burns. It is an unsettling word. Why? I agree. But
it sounds more witchcraft than...
yeah. And, we're not really into that.
Yeah, we're not into that at all.
Why are we not into that?
Because it's not Jesus in the gospel, man.
Okay. That's right. So we don't do a lot of witchcraft around here.
We don't do any.
And we don't really invite people, to get into a trance on Sunday morning, right?
Right.
So what's going on? Okay, let me relieve your concerns just by, an appeal to the text itself, and also just how challenging translation is. So the text says, while I was praying in the temple, I was in I'm going to just give you the Greek word and you tell me if you get it. I was in ecstasy.
So he is just enraptured in prayer.
That's it.
And just no distractions. He is just completely focused and feels like he is right there with the Lord.
You feel good about that happening on Sunday?
I feel better about that.
I feel a lot better. I got no problem with that happening on Sunday morning.
Yeah.
So this is not witchcraft. This is just a moment of enraptured prayer. So and language changes, and it's hard to render this, because I agree that word has a different set of associations. I fell into, and I was in enraptured prayer, and in the context of the prayer, what's the point? The point isn't the ecstatic state, but it was that he has another vision of the Lord. So just like Isaiah 6, Isaiah sees the Lord and says, who will go for us? And Isaiah says, "Here am I, send me." I mean, this is a very close parallel to that, because he's in the temple, he's praying, Isaiah similarly, and here Jesus tells him to leave the city because they're not going to accept your testimony. And that is also closely paralleled to what the Lord tells Isaiah also. In Isaiah 6, he has a vision of the Lord in the temple. He receives forgiveness, he's commissioned, and yet the Lord tells Isaiah that the people are going to be ever hearing but not, ever listening but not, ever seeing but not perceiving. And so if you really got to remember, he's addressing this group of devout Israelites who know the Bible, and he is likening his conversion, his commissioning here, and the vision. He's telling that in a way that should make us all think of Isaiah 6. And the point of Isaiah 6 is why don't the people believe? Because they're trapped in idolatry. And the plot line of Isaiah points forward to God removing scales from our eyes so we can see and hear. So I think we're supposed to pick up on that, or I think he's hoping that his audience will.
So he's recounting this prayerful interaction, this vision from the Lord. The Lord is saying, I want you to go to a different group of people, get out of Jerusalem. He then kind of responds back in 1920, 21 even, with a little more of like, to me it sounds like, well, this is why I could connect to these people. He says, I was in the synagogue, I was imprisoning other people, the blood of Stephen, I was a part of that.
Right. Yeah, and he's identifying the zeal of the people who are ready to imprison him and kill him right now.
Yeah.
So he's saying, I'm like you, and then here comes the punchline of the testimony. The decisive line is verse 21.
Yeah.
And he said to me, this is the risen Jesus, saying, "Go, I will send you far away unto the nations." And that's really a restatement of the commissioning of Christ. So remember why they arrested him. They arrested him because they felt like he had defiled the sanctuary by bringing people of different ethnicities inside of it. And now he's telling them, I didn't do that just because I thought that would be a nice thing to do. I did that because Jesus told me to do that. And this is a deep theme in the Old Testament. God, in the calling of Abraham, Abraham's called out from the nations and their idolatry, but then the Lord, right at the beginning in Genesis 12, tells Abraham that in you all the families of the earth will be blessed. There's this deep prophetic theme that in the latter days the nations are going to stream to Zion, believe in the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I think he's giving them both the divine authority from Jesus to go to the nations. I think the fact that he has invoked the scene of Isaiah 6 and this Isaiah's like Old Testament version of the Great Commission, I think he's preparing the soil for people to hear and recognize, like going to the ends of the earth. This is a very biblical and scriptural idea that we've been hoping for and praying for a really long time. So he's trying to say, I'm like you, and Jesus met me, and Jesus sent me to fulfill this thing that we actually are all hoping for. That's what he's hoping will happen.
That's not what happens.
And that's not what happens. So we're going to have to just cliffhang this for a second and pick this up in our next episode, because it's that word, in English we have the Gentiles. I love to point this out to people. The Greek text of Acts 22:21 sends me to the ethne, this is the same word that is used in the Great Commission. Go make disciples of all nations. Ethne, yeah. All nations, all ethno-linguistic groups of people on the planet, all the people envisioned in Genesis 12 to be blessed by the line of Abraham are in view. And the word Gentile is just the Latin word for nations. So it's just a Latinism in the English Bible. But go, I'm sending you to the nations. And Luke says they listened up to this word. It was the word, nations, that just made the crowd explode. And we got to figure out why in the next episode.
All right.
So
until then.
So thanks for joining us on The Word Revealed. Let's learn to share our testimonies well. Let's follow your sagacious advice to not say too much about the first part, that we neglect the real hero of the story.
Yeah.
It's Christ. And also follow the testimony not just to our conversion, but include our commissioning.
That'll preach.
I think that will, won't it?
It will.
We often think that the story's over when we believe.
Yeah.
But we receive in Christ's grace, forgiveness, and apostleship, mission.
There we go.
So you don't just hear, thank you for forgiveness, now I go my merry way. You're forgiven, like you said, blessed to be a blessing.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone, for joining us on The Word Revealed. We're going to pick up the second part of this compelling testimony in the next episode.
Looking forward to it. Looking forward to being with you all again.
If you're enjoying The Word Revealed, please help us make this podcast known to people in your life and spheres of influence. God bless you all.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you for joining Dr. David Palmer, Senior Pastor at Kenwood Baptist Church in Cincinnati, and Scott Burns, Associate Pastor. Meet us here next time for another conversation on the Bible.